So, ladies and gentlemen, I am sure you will all be happy and relieved to know that both myself and my wife Kate, or the Kate as many of you know her, we both survived Nemo, we survived the snowpocalypse, we survived the snowmageddon, we survived the blizzard of doom. And look, folks, I'm not gonna lie, there was a hell of a lot of snow here in Boston. There was a hell of a lot of snow. We got over 2 feet of snow, and we had these crazy blizzard winds, which ultimately made snowdrifts easily 5 or 6 feet tall, at least by us. I mean, just crazy big snowdrifts. When you look at the cars outside, there were just these kind of like lumps of cars just completely buried on the roads. So what happened was the city of Boston essentially shut down on Friday evening and afternoon, and was shut down pretty much until Sunday night. There were no trains, there were no buses, cars were not allowed on the roads until Sunday. Well, hell, if they tried, they weren't going to go anywhere. There was that much snow, you weren't going anywhere if you actually tried to drive. My wife and I were lucky. We did not have to go anywhere. We essentially just hung out at the apartment. We ate a lot. We drank a lot. Hell, we watched the whole first season of the show Treme over the weekend, which is, at least from the first season, is an awesome show. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend it. It's David Simon's series that he did after The Wire, all about post-Katrina New Orleans. The first season is really, really pretty phenomenal. We played in the snow, which was fun. Speaking of playing in the snow, a bunch of college students, I believe from BU, had a big snowball fight on the Esplanade over by the Charles River. And apparently at this snowball fight, which had hundreds of college students having this giant snowball fight, apparently a police officer got hit by a snowball. And that police officer responded to getting hit by a snowball by tasing and throwing to the ground and pinning face down in the snow for several minutes a college student. This cop apparently tased a kid after he got hit with a snowball. And look, obviously I am not saying that throwing a snowball at a cop is a smart or wise move. I'm not saying that. But, let's be honest. This was a giant snowball fight. It was billed as such. Hundreds of students were there to have a snowball fight, and maybe the police officer could have, I don't know, thrown a snowball back. Maybe that would have been the proper response to being hit with a snowball, would to be to throw a snowball back. Maybe throw a snowball back instead of tasing, throwing to the ground, and arresting a college kid. It's just a thought. If you're in and at a snowball fight, you can reasonably assume that you actually might get hit with a few snowballs. That's what happens at snowball fights. But anyway, that's not what happened there. This kid got arrested. But speaking of Boston law enforcement, I actually wanted to give an Occupy Boston update that happened at the end of last week on Friday. The Suffolk County Prosecutor's Office has in fact dropped all of the charges against Occupy Boston activists who were arrested at either the October or the December police raids of 2011. So look, when I heard this, so all the charges were dropped against the activists who were arrested. So when I initially heard this news, my first reaction was, oh, this is great. This is wonderful. I know some of the people who were arrested and were still awaiting trial, and the charges were dropped against them. That is great. And I tweeted my approval of such news. However, after I tweeted that, my friend Robin Jacks, who was a major player in Occupy Boston, who does a lot of great work still, she actually replied to my tweet that actually the fact that the charges were dropped was, when you think about it, actually not a positive thing here. And you know what? Robin was entirely correct about this. And let me explain why. There's a lot of reasons, but let's start with the fact that these raids and arrests happened in October and December of 2011. That's right, 2011. 2011. Last time I checked, oh yes, let's look at the calendar here. It's 2013. We have an entire year missing here. These charges are over 14 months old. We are supposed to have a right to a speedy trial here in the United States of America. And you know, it's been a while since we talked about Occupy. So let's just get back to one of the more obvious points that comes with the type of protest that Occupy was doing here. Look, the vast majority of those who were arrested at Occupy Boston and at Occupy camps all across the country were arrested for doing nothing more than being in a public park or standing on a public sidewalk and exercising their First Amendment rights of free speech and freedom of assembly. Period. That's what happened, folks. After the raids that happened all across the country, but specifically the raids that happened here in Boston, after the raids at Dewey Square, the prosecutors offered most of those hundreds of protesters who were arrested, they offered them a deal. They said if they plead guilty, they would let them off with a $50 fine, and they would drop the serious charge of trespassing and let it off as like a minor offense. And most of the defendants did this. And you know, that makes sense. I mean, look, they didn't want to go through a lengthy court battle. And again, it's over 14 months now, so they were correct that this was going to last a long time. And maybe some of them didn't have the money for lawyers. They didn't have the money to take time off of work and go to court, which is certainly an understandable position for people to take. You know, hell, before the charges were dismissed, these Occupy Boston defendants had seen their court dates moved and delayed and switched numerous times. So many of those arrested took the deal and the $50 fine. However, some of the defendants that we're going to talk about here refused to take the deal because some of the defendants asserted that when they were arrested, they were doing absolutely, positively nothing illegal. They asserted that they did nothing illegal, that they were only using their constitutionally guaranteed rights of free speech and assembly. And they asserted that by being arrested and by being evicted from Dewey Square and the Greenway, which is a public space by law that was supposed to remain open to the citizens of Boston by law, they asserted that they were falsely arrested. That they were falsely arrested and their constitutional rights were in fact taken away from them by the Boston Police Department on those days in October and December of 2011. Their rights were taken away, and these activists wanted their day in court. And so therefore, the fact that the charges were dropped is not a reason to celebrate. They wanted to go in front of a judge and a jury and contest their very arrests. The National Lawyers Guild, which we've talked about it before, the National Lawyers Guild is just an amazing organization. They were defending these activists for free. The NLG, they're the ones who wear the green hats at protests. They're the ones who volunteer their time at, not only countless occupations, but protests. They work as legal observers for free. The National Lawyers Guild were defending these Occupy Boston activists. And the National Lawyers Guild released a statement saying that they were ready to go to court, and they were prepared to subpoena Mayor Tom Menino. They were prepared to subpoena the police commissioner, the head of the Greenway. They wanted them to explain why they took away the constitutional rights of citizens of Massachusetts. The National Lawyers Guild had spent, a long time preparing a case and a defense. And after 14 months, over a year, the prosecutor's office just decides to, drop the case. Poof, it's gone. Charges dropped. It's gone. Folks, That's not an accident. The time frame here is not, those prosecutors waiting this long to drop these ridiculous and false charges is not an accident. Look, just starting out, the police arrested those activists to stifle and silence speech that challenges the 1%. They violated constitutional rights to stifle and silence speech that challenged the 1%. In other cities, people were beaten by police officers and pepper sprayed and stuff like that. All of this though, having your rights taken away, having your speech taken away, is a form of intimidation. Look, I was at both of the raids down at Occupy Boston. I saw the police in riot gear, folks. If you want to somehow tell me that was not a form of state intimidation, you're out of your minds. You're out of your minds. I saw the cops. I was there. This was not, hey, they didn't beat Occupy Boston people with clubs and pepper spray them. Well, whoop-de-friggin' do. They still took away their constitutional rights. The bar is not the norm is not that people should be pepper sprayed and beaten with clubs. So it was intimidation. It was a form of harassment. And the trial process that these activists went through, the 14 months of waiting and being told to show up for a court hearing, and then when they get there, they reschedule it. That is actually a form of intimidation and harassment too. They took away their rights when they arrested them, and when the occupiers fought these bogus charges, when they said, no, I'm not pleading guilty, I will see you in court, they delayed, and then they dropped the charges. Which frankly is kind of the norm around the country. Most of these cases where occupiers actually challenge the charges that are against them, most of the time when they do it, the majority of them actually get dropped. Which again was the occupiers' point here. The point was that the protesters did absolutely positively nothing wrong. The police were the ones in the wrong. The mayor was the one who was wrong. The Occupy Boston activists wanted their day in court, and after a 14-month delay, and after being screwed around by these friggin' prosecutors for over a year, the prosecutors just denied it, pulled it away. I can only hope that maybe some of these Occupy Boston activists will maybe talk to people at the ACLU and talk to the NLG and take a cue from some of the folks at Occupy Wall Street in New York City. Maybe they'll take a cue, follow their lead, and sue the city of Boston. Sue the mayor of Boston. Sue the bloody police department. Most listeners know journalist John Neffel. John was on the show many, many months ago talking about how he is in fact part of a lawsuit against the city of New York because he was falsely arrested while covering an Occupy Wall Street protest. He's been arrested more than once, but he's actually part of an actual lawsuit against the city for his false arrest. So, Occupy Boston activists and protesters, if you can, and if you have the inclination, and look, I'm not in your shoes, and I understand if you don't. Hell, you just went through 14 months of having justice denied to you. But seriously, think about suing the damn city of Boston. You know that you were not in the wrong when you were arrested. The city has pretty much admitted that by dropping the charges against you. If you have it in you, maybe, just maybe, the city, the mayor, and the police force should be made to pay for what they did to you. We'll be right back.